Hello YouTube world, Everyday Oppression here with a new video. First in 2017. Finally. So what this video is going to be about is probably what most of you have been waiting to hear from, is the court case involving Allison Tiemann and the Honey Badger Brigade group. I classify myself as a member of the Honey Badgers against the Calgary Expo. The background context of this court case is that during the Calgary Expo, set in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, Allison Tiemann and the Honey Badgers had a booth in order to showcase who they were, to sell their products, and to, just have a good old time in one of the largest geek fests in Canada. So what happened is that there was a feminist panel in regards to women involved in comics and how they are portrayed. And Allison and the other Honey Badgers decided to discuss the issues of feminism and men's rights activists in regards to women in geekdom. So after being involved with this discussion that Allison, calmly asked to partake in, the feminists, of course, said yes. After this, they were expelled by the Calgary Expo for harassment or entering into the Comic-Con under false pretenses. You can check out Karen Straughn's videos more about the infiltration of the Honey Badger Brigade in order to harass feminist women at this panel. That aside, this video here has more to do with the actual court case. So since I live in Edmonton, the same city as Karen here, I drove down to Calgary, which is a 3-hour drive away, to witness this court case. So I listened to the video of Karen asking people to sit in the seats of the courtroom to bear witness to the case. And so this video is to describe that. So as far as I can tell, I am allowed to talk about the case. I won't go into too many specifics over it because I feel that the Honey Badgers will probably elaborate that on their own. But I will be discussing my viewpoints and my experience with sitting in the court case. So I'll summarize it, keeping it as simple as I can. The court case happened on January the 12th and January the 13th, which was a Thursday and Friday. It was held in the Calgary Court Center in the city of Calgary. Time that it started was at 9:30 a.m. in courtroom number 1508. Now, when I arrived there, it turned out that there was 4 cases going off at once. So there was 3 other cases being presented, as well as Allison's and the Honey Badgers. So upon arriving in there, we did the normal stand-up for the judge, and we sat down. Allison and her agent, not her lawyer, but her agent, Mr. Capolti, I believe his name was there to represent their case. A man by the name of Mr. Chu was the lawyer for Calgary Expo, as well as representing the Mary Sue. So from here on out, anytime I refer to the Calgary Expo, that is in reference to the lawyer who is representing them and the Mary Sue. And if I use the Honey Badgers, that's obviously to represent Allison and her agent, Harry Capito. It began there, basically going over why they were there, and this was about an amendment of an affidavit sent in by Allison Tiemann and the Honey Badgers against the Calgary Expo. So Mr. Chu himself kept trying to get the case thrown out because of typo issues, semantics, Allison and the Honey Badgers accidentally claiming the wrong party to sue. So if you look at Karen's videos, apparently Calgary Expo has multiple businesses under very similar names, probably to, avoid lawsuits this way. But so in the first 15-20 minutes, we talked about it, but the judge, seeing that the case could take longer than usual, he decided to break with Allison's case and bring in the other 3 in order to deal with those real quick. So those were punched through really quickly, and then we got back onto the honey badgers. That was the first part. And then the second part dived more into the case. And Calgary Expo's position was to throw out the case because this was a case about defamation. The honey badgers were suing not for defamation, which is an attack on someone's character or their reputation. It was an attack on them and their property, their wares, their t-shirts, their comic books, stuff like that. And so they were suing under injurious falsehood. Now, the first step of this case was that we had to prove that this was a case of injurious falsehood and not defamation, because Mr. Chu and Calgary Expo was trying to equate injurious falsehood alongside with defamation. Now, the thing I found interesting is that this court is not in the jurisdiction to deal with the case that is about defamation. Apparently, you have to go to a higher level of court, and this provincial level court cannot deal with a case that is defamation. So this is where Mr. Chu was trying to equate injurious falsehood along with defamation so that the court couldn't even deal with it that day to get it booted out. So it is the responsibility of the honey badgers and Harry to defend the notion that it is an injurious falsehood. So it was very interesting watching the actions of this lawyer for Calgary Expo in trying to weed his way out based on semantics. The second attempt was trying to claim that Allison and the honey badgers were suing the wrong entity. So Mr. Capulti would send corresponding emails to the Calgary Expo representatives asking for their company name in order to send out this affidavit. So there was a lot of back and forth in regards to the letters, and the Calgary Expo just kept kind of dodging the naming of their entity for this lawsuit that Allison and the honey badgers were trying to get. Now, the time frame, it was a bit iffy as this amended affidavit kept going back and forth. And it turns out that Harry Capulti was late with the due date of the requirement for the affidavit to get punched through. July 15th of 2015, I believe, is when the due date was, and Harry had done it 10 days after. So Mr. Chu is now saying that there was a confusion with the time frame in which Harry and Allison were putting through their affidavit, and it was behind the deadline. So therefore, the case should be thrown out. So that was the second attempt by Calgary Expo to get the case dismissed. And it was just so remarkable to watch. So after this, we actually decided to take a lunch break and then come back later. This is when I got to meet some of the honey badgers, such as Karen, Mike, who is known as Dr. Randermacam. They had witnesses and members of the honey badgers who are all over the world. Some are from the United States. Mike is from the UK. So we have flown them in order to have this court case, in order for them to act as witnesses in testimony for the defense of the honey badgers. Now, in the beginning of the court case, the judge had asked all witnesses to exit out of the courtroom. So the only ones who were allowed in there were the defendant, Calgary Expo, and Allison and her agent, or anybody sitting in the booth not as a witness, so more of an observer, which would include me. After the lunch break, we finally got to go back in, and we spent a few hours, and the body of the defense was for Mr. Capulti to defend the notion that this was an injurious falsehood. And if it was claimed to be defamation, then there's no point of moving forward. So he had to defend it. Now, he had a really good stance by using the history of injurious falsehood, where it came from, the difference it was between defamation, which is an attack on someone's reputation or their character, whereas the injurious falsehood is attacking someone's product, saying that their product is bad, but not necessarily hurting their reputation. So you could say Joe Blow here is a really nice guy, but the cars that he sells bust down. So this would be an example of injurious falsehood. or his reputation would say, Joe Blow over here is a fucking idiot and you shouldn't buy his products. So there's the big difference there. And I felt he had a strong case, and he also used about 10 or 11 previous court cases that had to specifically do with injurious falsehoods versus defamation. So he had a very good, strong support system, and he elaborated the difference of it quite well. We finally got to get through the affidavits of Allison and the Honey Badgers, with all the evidence that showed that they were infiltrating the expo under false pretenses, which they weren't. So with the numerous amounts of evidence and correspondence between the Calgary Expo and the Honey Badgers, it was determined that they weren't lying about themselves. Their name tags were Honey Badger Brigade, their email correspondence was Honey Badger Brigade, and the Calgary Expo responded with the Honey Badger radio. So the booth had Honey Badger t-shirts, merchandise, the signs. A lot of the, defense on the defendant's side of Calgary Expo were trying to say that Allison and the Honey Badgers were there to incite harassment amongst other people, especially feminist women on a feminist panel. Now, if you take a look at this audio, which is online, you can see that, Allison definitely harassed the women there.
But that's just it. What had happened? At what point did all of a sudden did it become a dirty thing for women to be into this stuff? Like, in the eyes of so many of these men's rights activist types, or...
Would you like us to field that question?
Huh?
Would you like us to field that question?
Sure, go for it.
Because I am a men's rights activist, so you can hate on me. The reason why I don't like feminism is because you promote this idea that women are defined by being victims. If you look at the context of all of your issues, men also face considerable problems as well. And they need to be brought into the story, and not just for men's sake, because this hides men's vulnerability, also for the sake of challenging the notion that women are defined as victims.
I know, isn't Allison the worst? Frick. The feminists disagreed with Allison being a men's rights activist and the Honey Badger group somehow being associated with Gamergate, which is in controversy right now as labeled as a hate group, which a lot of us who are on the Gamergate side understand that it's not, and we have an inclusion number of diverse people, people of different races, different sexualities, different sexes, like we have men and women. Gamergate was all about authenticity and honesty within journalism, especially in the world of gaming. So feminists booted them out because they didn't like what Allison had to say. And then the Calgary Expo kept saying that they were harassing, blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. So the court case kept going, and finally the Honey Badgers got to defend their side of it using the evidence presented in the affidavit, which the judge has access to. So we're reading through this, and the Calgary Expo is still trying to get the case thrown out based on semantics, based on the title of the affidavit, and attacking the wrong company. And they're also trying to showcase how Allison is trying to infiltrate under false pretenses. But our side definitely had a good stance. I felt that the agent was really good in elaborating what was being constructed by Calgary Expo was in fact a lie. By the end of this court case, which ended around 4 p.m., it turns out that the judge said that he couldn't make a final decision because he needed to go over all the evidence. And that he would be back on Friday morning at 9:30 to either give his decision, a judgment whether or not this was a valid court case, a valid case for Allison and the Honey Badgers to rightfully sue the Calgary Expo, but with a small possibility of it being dismissed. So obviously the judge has to be impartial as possible, hear from both sides of the case, the defendant, Calgary Expo, as well as the plaintiffs, the Honey Badgers, in order to make his decision. Now, unfortunately, I did not have time to go to the morning case to hear what this decision is. I kind of drank a lot during the night before and stayed up playing cards with my friends, And really, I just couldn't get out of bed the next morning. Sorry, guys.
My head really hurts. Let's just speed this along.
I honestly don't know what the final judgment was in regards to this case. So I am hoping to hear from Karen or Allison or any of the other honey badgers in dealing with this case. So right now, it stands that, at least from what I feel from it, is that the judge, recognized the case as an injurious falsehood. Okay, so it sounded like we were allowed to continue supporting our case because it was seen as an injurious falsehood and not defamation. The Calgary Expo just kept trying to deflect the correspondence and the evidence by claiming that Allison, or she wasn't who she was supposed to be. But you know how it is with lawyers, they're all greasy.
I want the truth! You can't handle the truth!
I do hope it gets through because it's the right thing, ladies and gentlemen. And I really don't want Allison and the honey badgers to have to suffer just because of a difference of opinion. Really. The feminist panels claimed Allison was harassing them and deflected the talk, but she didn't. We have audio proof that she didn't. And they engaged in a consensual manner. And it's basically a case of guilty by association. Okay. Allison, who's a men's rights activist, feminists are trying to label all men's rights activists as a hate group. The association with Gamergate and standing up against censorship, which Gamergate, I believe, is about. And they are saying that the honey badgers are part of Gamergate, which is also a hate group alongside them being a men's rights activist group. And it's like, so everything is boiling down to guilty by association, but that's not the case at all. Allison didn't harass the panel. The honey badgers weren't there under false pretenses. And when they were asked to leave, they didn't fight, they didn't scream and shout, they left. So they followed the rules and policies that the Calgary Expo had in regards to harassment. Like, they didn't harass anybody. And the fact that they didn't harass anybody and they were kicked out for having a difference of opinion to that of the mainstream just shows you how much control they have in the narrative, and that feminists think that they are right and that they just have all this control. This case is important in the sense that we need to stand up against bullying. We need to stand up against the mainstream media, which is trying to fabricate this narrative that, minority groups such as men's rights activist movement and the honey badgers are part of a hate group, and all they want to do is just shit all over everybody. But that's not the case. It's not the case at all. And I believe that the case strongly supported in favor of the honey badgers. So I am hoping that the judge did make a good decision, and we shall go from there. Another thing that I found interesting is that the Calgary Expo lawyer, the defendant, was also representing the Mary Sue. Now, here's the very interesting thing. Since the Mary Sue is based out of New York City, it is in the American country and thus under American jurisdiction. So the honey badgers can't really sue the Mary Sue because it's from a different country. There's no Canadian base for the Mary Sue because it's in New York and it's online. And I find this to be very interesting. So even though the Mary Sue wrote an article to slam the honey badgers based on the correspondence with members that they had at the actual expo, which the evidence shows correspondence, thanks to the honey badgers there, Allison can't really sue the Mary Sue unless she goes to America, unless she goes to New York City and files a complaint under American law, because Mary Sue falls outside of the Canadian jurisdiction. But yet they have Mr. Chu, the representative lawyer for Calgary Expo, also representing the Mary Sue. And I feel like they're trying to tailcoat this this way out of being sued by saying that the Mary Sue cannot be sued because they are not Canadian. And I feel like the Canadian Expo is attaching themselves with the Mary Sue as another means to get out of being sued. So it's, they're so slimy. They are so slimy. Anyway, guys, let me know what you think in the comments. What did you know about it? How do you feel about the Calgary Expo? And what do you think should happen? And until then, I will hopefully punch out a few more videos in the future. Look out for those. And I will see you all next time. Take care of one another. Bye.
Men also face considerable problems as well, and they need to be brought into the story, and not just for men's sake, because this hides men's vulnerability, also for the sake of challenging the notion that women are defined as victims.